Hello and welcome to the coronavirus update for the 12th of June 2020, where there are now some 5+ million cases in America. And you might be saying, I'm crazy, that says 2 million cases in America. Probably not. It's probably somewhere between 5 and 10 million. And I'll explain how you get to that number. So another number I've been following, for those who've been watching this channel for some time, I've been tracking the ratio of the total number of confirmed cases versus the total number of people who've been confirmed, the total number of people who've died. And the ratio of those numbers, of course, is just the mortality rate. If you're confirmed as having the disease, what's your probability of dying? And I've been following the ratio of those numbers since all the way back when there were less than 1 million cases in the wide world. And then the mortality rate was about 4.5%, peaked up at about 3 million cases at about 7%, and it's been on a slow downtick ever since. However, whilst I did this analysis in the last video, I didn't quite grasp the full significance of it. You see, this on its own is not so important. What you really want is, between these 2 points here, I know the total number of people who extra have died, and I know the number of extra cases, so I can calculate the mortality rate for just those 2 points, or for just these 2 points, and so on and so forth across the range. And if you do that, you get this line here, which is the mortality rate at any instant of time. And what this shows you is the mortality rate actually peaked up at about 10% and is now down to 3%. Now, at some point, this has to level out. Where it's going to level out, this is, again, complicated. This isn't a line you can easily extrapolate because it's done with world data. Some cases are cooking up, some are going down. But if I'm going to take a bold guess, right, the China data, when it first came out, estimated a mortality rate of 1 to 2%. So I'm going to take the 2% number as where this is eventually going to plateau out. And that means you can choose lower numbers if you want, but you'll see why that might not. Well, let's take 2%, okay? That means that at its peak, assuming the mortality rate is constant, the mortality rate was always a constant. That means that back in this portion of the curve, somewhere between 2 out of 3 and 4 out of 5 cases of coronavirus were undiagnosed, which means that if you come back to this number here for the US, you can multiply it by somewhere between 3 and 5. And the lower number you put on the mortality rate, the higher that number actually gets. So that means that America has had probably, conservative numbers are probably 5 to 10 million. 5 million, I would guess, is the lower bound. 10 is probably getting nearer the upper bound cases. Which is still actually a quite low number when you consider America's got a population of 300 million. 10 million is only still 3% of the population. Another way you can get to that same number is, let's just take the deaths in America, 100,000, and let's take our mortality rate of 2%, which means that in order to get that many deaths off a 2% mortality rate, you would need about 5 million cases. So they all sort of gel out in the right area, or if it's a 1% mortality rate, you need 10 million, and so forth. Actually, no, if it's a 1% mortality rate, you need 20 million. Hang on. 1% would mean you need to add 2 zeros. 1 0, 2 zeros. 10 million, yeah. Yeah, okay, that's right. Yeah, 10 million for 10 million cases with a 1% mortality rate would give you that. 5 million cases with a 2% mortality rate would also give you that. So the key thing that you get out of all of this is it now becomes very difficult to compare front end and back ends of curves, especially if you're looking at total number of cases. So this is another one that I've been looking at for some time. Yeah, in any instance of time, the data is pretty decent. But if you're trying to get a trend out of this, it's very difficult because the detection rate is going up all the time. So let me just explain what you're looking at here. What you're looking at is the total daily cases in America, which, peak at about 30,000 and are now down to some 20,000. And now I'm going to make the bold assumption that these numbers that I was looking at for the world apply to America. It's just an assumption at this point, but probably it's going to be better than not making that assumption. And so let's say that we're getting down to the actual detection rate at the moment. What this is actually telling us is the real rate should have been about 5 times higher back at the beginning. So, back here you weren't getting 30,000 cases per day. It was, 100,000 cases per day. This curve should actually, if you had the real data, it would look, it would shoot all the way up here, and then it actually comes down to about this point now. This is sort of an accurate point. And this is before you get on to more complicated things like the population is doing different things like relaxing quarantine, going to parties or protests or whatever. That's that's the sort of reason why there's probably been a lot more cases than that in America. The one that I still don't get is virtually everywhere in the world, especially in Europe. Europe is the one that is a real head scratcher. Imagine at this point here, you just totally relax all the quarantine and just continue like you did before. You should just continue the exponent like previously. I mean, even if there's a factor of 5 lower than it is, you still expect it to tick upwards. Yet nowhere in Europe is really doing this. And that I just don't get. Meanwhile, with places like America, even if you sort of factor in this, the curve actually is coming down much more steeply than it looks like here. America, someone did mention, and it's a valid point, that these big countries, all the countries at the top here are big countries. US, 300 million. Brazil, 200 million. Russia, 150 million. India, 1 billion plus. So, it might be that there are limitations for big countries to respond or something. But, by the way, just so you know, assuming comparable detection rates, Brazil is now the most infectious country on the planet with 30,000 new cases per day with a population of 200 million, whereas America is 20,000 cases per day with 300 million population. But I don't understand. Even the UK everywhere is mostly relaxing their quarantine, but the numbers aren't ticking up again. And people have suggested all sorts of things. It's the climate, but the trends don't. There doesn't seem to be any coherence between all of the trends. So, and of course, the other one is that everyone has already had the coronavirus, and therefore that's why it's going down, which would mean that this number isn't so much 2 million as 200 million. That's about where you would need for the sort of herd immunity to start kicking in. At which point, actually, I'll probably come to this. I'll do these another day. So, the hydroxychloroquine, there was a big scandal about some data, some study that was done on hydroxychloroquine. It was almost complete bullshit. Retracted from one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world. And that was the article that people like the WHO stopped their hydroxychloroquine trials on. In the meanwhile, more studies are coming up and basically saying, yeah, there's no real effect, which was always the expected result. And it's sort of criminal if you think about it. Basically, on a conspiracy theory, some massive amount of effort was put in to basically studying voodoo. They might have said, amethyst crystals or homeopathy cure coronavirus or kill coronavirus. There's no real expectation for a drug like this to actually interfere with the life cycle of the coronavirus. And I'm fairly specific in what I'm saying there, in that if you're looking at stopping people from dying, quite often you just need to alleviate the symptoms that end up killing them, and that can help out a lot. There's a sort of roll of the dice chance for that, but I mean, it's an astronomical long shot. In that, if all it took to reduce the swelling in the lungs was this drug, all that stuff's been looked at a long time ago, and hydroxychloroquine's not it. Anyway, I'll come back to that another time, along with this thing, which is just sadly depressing. It's Fox News. I'll go over it in detail because it's just soul destroying to watch. I mean, not only does it completely undermine everything that Trump said, that all of this was necessary and there would have been 2 million dead if they did nothing, which is that's where all of the early models were. And if that's the best data you've got to go on, saying, let's not do anything, maybe not the best way of doing things. And on top of that, I mean, we still don't really have a good feel as to how many people have had the virus. If you actually have had the virus, if you keep the antibodies for it, which means that you're immune in the future, or how long you keep the immunity to the virus. So, this ain't over by a long way yet. Like I was saying, there's something weird happening. With almost no effort, all these countries have relaxed their social distancing to the point where it's 1/10 of what it was before, and nothing. I mean, there's only one other sort of idea that kind of makes sense, is that the majority of the spread here was sort of super spreader events, that you get one guy who is like super infectious and he can infect tens of thousands if he goes to a big event. And therefore, the key difference here is there aren't big events going on. I don't know. There are no sensible explanations at the moment. Anyway, I hope you found that useful. If you did, drop a thumbs up on it. Would be awesome. If you want to support this sort of thing, Patreon links below. And thanks for watching.